Your Honor? I never believed I'd be here, battling the man who vowed me forever. The words shook from Janelle Brown's mouth, weighing heavy with an intensity that seemed to resonate through the hushed courtroom. Even the reporters scratching pens stopped for a brief moment. The room was heavy with anticipation, as if the space itself was breathing in pause. Janelle's fingers wrapped around the wood of the witness stand, her knuckles white, her voice only just level. She had entered that courthouse with a halo of cameras flashing and screaming, reporters shouting questions at her. But the moment she was in there, once those doors closed and the world beyond receded, this wasn't a trial anymore, this was her reckoning. The ring of the gavel previously had shaken her bones, a harsh reminder that she wasn't dreaming. She was indeed here, standing before the man she once trusted with her life, the man who had spoken of family, loyalty, and togetherness, and left her with betrayal, isolation, and shattered children. Kody Brown sat opposite her at the defense table, his golden curls neatly restrained, suit crisp, face smug. His lawyer leaned over him, whispering in his ear. But Kody never looked away from Janelle. His eyes narrowed, as if challenging her to keep going. But this time, Janelle wasn't the quiet wife. This time, she wasn't the quiet woman who nodded her head and swallowed her tears. She had learned to speak up, and she wasn't going to let it be taken from her again. The judge, a stern silver-haired woman with piercing eyes, leaned forward in her seat. "Mrs. Brown, please go on." Janelle swallowed hard. Memories flooded her mind. Memories of lonely nights weeping on her own. Memories of Kody brushing aside her objections. Memories of the family she had once struggled so fiercely to maintain. Each flash of hurt galvanized her strength. She tilted her head up. "I never did want this, Your Honor. For years I gave up everything for my family. I gave up my own desires, my own aspirations, because I had a promise. I had believed in love. I had believed in him." Her voice cracked, but only briefly. The crowd leaned in, enthralled. The cameras outside were pointless now. What was unfolding in this courtroom was greater than any reality show plot. This was the unvarnished truth. Janelle went on. "When the world saw us on TV, they laughed and smiled and observed a giant family that looked impenetrable. But in private, it was totally different. In private, I was left to bear the burden of children, bills, and sadness. And him," she stopped, her anger shaking her voice. "And him constructing another life with the wife he loved best." Gasps broke from the crowd. The name was not said, but they all knew she meant Robin. Kody shifted uncomfortably, rolling his eyes, saying something to his attorney. But his arrogance just fed the tension in the air. Janelle continued. "For years I believed, if I worked harder, if I loved harder, if I kept my family together tighter, he would see me. He would value me. But he never did. Instead, he told me I was too independent. He told me my strength was an issue." Can you imagine that, Your Honor? Being told that your capacity to stand on your own 2 feet was a defect. The judge's eyes softened a little, her pen hovering over her notepad. Janelle's tears streamed down her face, but she didn't brush them away. She wanted the court, the judge, even Kody to see every scar, every ounce of pain. "I wasn't just abandoned as a wife. I was abandoned as a woman, as a partner, and worse of all, as a mother raising children who deserved a father's love." Her voice shattered the quiet like thunder. The audience wasn't merely hearing them. She was making them feel. Some nodded, some wiped at their eyes, and even the bailiff fidgeted uncomfortably, as if repressing sympathy. Janelle steadied her breathing. She remembered the night she packed her things, her hands shaking as she loaded the car. Her kids, confused but resilient, watched her drive them away from the house that was supposed to be a family home. She remembered looking in the rearview mirror, seeing the tears in their eyes, and promising herself, "One day, I'll fight for us. One day, our voices will matter." And now, here she was. She stretched in toward the microphone. "This isn't about divorce forms or property. This isn't about TV contracts or family image. This is about dignity, respect, telling the truth so my children know their mother never gave up on them, even when their father did." Kody's jaw snapped shut, His lawyer wrote frantically on his pad. But Janelle didn't give a damn. For once, she was in control. And she wasn't relinquishing the floor. Her gaze swept the courtroom. She saw Christine in the back row, her former sister-wife, tears shining on her cheeks. She saw Mary sitting rigidly beside her, lips quivering, as if recalling her own scars. And while Robin was not there, her shadow seemed to haunt every whispered secret, every hidden truth. Janelle squared her shoulders. I know everyone will say this is all about bitterness, or jealousy, or the dissolution of a marriage, but it's not. This is about survival. This is about standing up to a man who built his empire on control and manipulation, and telling him that we, his wives, his children, are not property. We're human beings, and we deserve better. The courtroom erupted into whispers. The judge rapped her gavel once, demanding order, but her eyes never wavered from Janelle. At this moment, Janelle was no longer a reality TV wife. She was no longer one chapter in Kody Brown's polygamous history. She was a woman reclaiming her life, her voice, and her power. Her last words in that initial testimony echoed like a call to war. I'm not afraid of the truth anymore. And if this courtroom is the only place I can speak it, then I will speak it loud enough for the world to hear. The silence that ensued was silencing. Even the correspondents outside, who couldn't pick up the exact words, could feel the gravity of what was taking place inside. Something historical, something raw, something real. And as Janelle took a step back, tears flowing freely now, everyone in that courtroom was certain of one thing. This trial was going to be about the breakdown of deception, the revealing of betrayal, and the victory of a woman who had been underestimated for much too long. Kody might have strode in thinking he still had things in hand, but by the end of the first session, it was obvious Janelle had already won the greatest fight. She'd discovered her voice, and there was no one who could silence her anymore. The judge leaned forward, her tone steady but unyielding. Mrs. Brown, you may proceed. Tell us why you've brought this case before the court. The room became even more silent. Each rustle of papers, each hack from the audience, each snap of a pen appeared to disappear. All that was left was Janelle, her breathing tremulous, her eyes welling up, and getting ready to unfold the layers of her existence. She breathed deeply, her words catching in her throat before she said them. Because I sacrificed everything to this family, and in return, I was abandoned and humiliated. The words hit like lightning. A few gasps circulated the gallery, reporters in the rear scribbled feverishly, and even the judge hesitated, eyes contracting, waiting for more. Janelle's hands shook, but her resolve grew stronger with every passing second. For decades I lived in a marriage where I was told my worth depended on how well I obeyed. I worked, I provided, I raised children, and I gave up my dreams so the family could thrive. But while I was carrying the weight, Kody was building walls, walls that shut me out and locked someone else in. Her voice broke on the final sentence, but she persevered. He sought control, he sought loyalty, but he never reciprocated. Kody shifted in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. His attorney leaned over him, speaking in a low voice in his ear. But Kody's self-satisfied half-smile stayed put. He wasn't shaken yet, not on the outside. But Janelle wasn't talking for him alone. She was talking for all the people who had believed in the image of their perfect family. She glanced toward the judge, her voice more abrasive now. When I married into this family, I was a believer in unity. I was a believer in the idea that we were more together. But the world didn't see the way we were torn apart. There were favorites. There were lies. There was betrayal. Her words shook with both rage and pain. I pleaded for fairness. I pleaded for equality, not for myself, but for my children. I wanted my children to feel that their dad loved them as much as he loved anyone else's. But the truth is, they didn't experience it. They felt abandoned. The audience murmured once more, the words cutting deep. Janelle's hand went to her chest, resting on her thudding heart. I'll never forget the evening my daughter Savannah asked me, "Why doesn't Dad want to come see me? Why doesn't he treat me like he treats Robin's kids?" How do you respond to that, Your Honor? How do you look into your child's eyes and tell them that their father's love has conditions? She stood there a moment, and for an instant the courtroom hung in agony with her silence. Even the judge's pen quivered in mid-air. In the back row, Christine blew her nose on a tissue, and Mary sat rigid, eyes shining. They knew nights like this. They knew this suffering. Janelle's voice fell to a whisper, but it rang out clearer than ever. My children should have been his pride, his joy, but instead, they were treated like responsibilities, while Robin's children were treated like jewels. Kody's jaw locked. His lawyer rushed to stand, objecting. Your Honor, this is irrelevant emotional testimony. This is not a custody trial. The judge brought down the gavel. Overruled. The witness will proceed. There was a tiny flash of relief that passed over Janelle's face. She had anticipated interruptions. She had anticipated efforts to quiet her. But she would not be quieted any longer. She raised her chin. Your Honor, that is relevant. Because this is not about betrayal. But to me, to the children we vowed to raise together, I remained faithful. I remained dedicated. I bore weights he never even saw. And for it I was cast aside like I was nothing. Her words cut through the courtroom like knives. She went on, her voice shaking with passion. Do you know what it's like to come into your own home and feel like you're invisible? To sit at a table and see your husband's love given to another woman while you're treated like a stranger. Her gaze flicked in Kody's direction. You said something once, Kody, that I was too independent, that I didn't need you. But the thing is, you didn't want me. You wanted control. And when you couldn't dominate me, you punished me with abandonment. Kody hunched forward, growling under his breath. But his microphone picked up. That's not true. She manipulated everything. The audience gasped, and the judge moved to silence him. Mr. Brown, you will be quiet until your lawyer calls you to testify. Janelle stood firm. I'm not manipulating anything. I'm speaking the truth. The truth I've been too afraid to speak for years. Her tears ran freely now, but she never did wipe them away. I didn't go there seeking vengeance. I went there because my children need to know their mother fought for them. I went there because I need to be recognized as something greater than disposable. I went there because women in this world, women like me, are silenced daily, reminded that pain is inconsequential. But today it is not. The courtroom was in stunned silence. Not even the toughest skeptics in the gallery could deny the raw emotion coming directly from her heart. She drew a trembling breath, her voice gentle but firm. You can strip away titles. You can strip away contracts, away reputation. But you cannot strip me away of my dignity. And you cannot strip me away of my truth. I loved him with all that I had, and he repaid me with betrayal. Her last words rang out in the room like a verdict prior to the verdict. Christine covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing quietly. Mary's shoulders shook as silent tears streamed down her face. Even the bailiff, standing sternly by the wall, blinked harder than usual. The judge leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on Janelle. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The weight of Janelle's testimony was already sinking deep into the foundation of the trial. And as Janelle moved back a step, holding on to the wooden stand to catch herself, the truth had finally been released. Betrayal had been revealed, not only to the judge, not only to the courtroom, but to the whole world standing outside those courthouse doors. And for the very first time, Kody Brown's carefully guarded image had started to break. The air in the courtroom was tense enough to choke on. Janelle's betrayal allegations still lingered in the air like smoke after fire. Everyone looked at her. Every pen wrote with great haste. Every camera outside seemed to push against the glass more insistently. Out of nowhere, Kody's attorney jumped up from his seat, his tone piercing. Objection, Your Honor. This is not testimony. It's grandstanding. This is a case regarding legal separation, not family counseling. The judge's eyebrow flew up, and she rapped once with her gavel. Overruled. The witness has the right to have her say, and the court will hear it. Sit down, counselor. The crowd burst into murmurs. Kody's lawyer sat reluctantly, but Kody himself leaned forward, his jaw clenched, his eyes blazing with anger and embarrassment. Janelle's eyes locked on him, her voice firm now. Do you recall, Kody, when you said to me that I was nothing without you? Do you recall indicating my independence was a threat to your control? The courtroom gasped. Kody finally lost it. That's a lie, he yelled, his voice echoing in the room. I never said that. She's manipulating me to make me look bad. The judge's gavel came down on the bench. Mr. Brown, you are in line. You will get your turn to testify. Otherwise, keep your mouth shut or I will have you held in contempt. But it was too late. The mask was off. For the first time, the courtroom witnessed not the charming television patriarch, but the man Janelle had lived with. The man who silenced, belittled, and dictated. Janelle breathed in tremulously, determined not to let his tantrum frighten her. You don't get to shut me up anymore, Kody. Not here. Not today. The crowd murmured again. A few clapped softly before the bailiff quieted them. Kody crossed his arms tightly, leaning back in his chair, scowling at her. But Janelle's determination only grew stronger. She went on, her voice shaking with emotion. I kept quiet for years to maintain harmony. I ingested my pain. I suppressed my rage, because I wanted the family to remain intact. But all it did was make you more able to hurt me. And you did. Over and over. Kody pounded his fist gently on the table, murmuring to his lawyer. His arrogance was beginning to crack, his facade wavering. The judge pulled forward. Mrs. Brown, go on. Janelle's eyes sparkled with tears, but her tone cut sharp as a knife. You punished me in silence. You punished me in absence. You punished me by devoting your time, your attention, and your affection to one woman, while the rest of us begged for leftovers. Gasps filled the room. Christine in the gallery closed her eyes, nodding in painful agreement. Mary's shoulders shook as she gripped a tissue, her own memories flashing back. Janelle's voice escalated. Do you have any idea what it is like to see your children cry because their father doesn't come through? To see them plead for your attention and brush them off as too much to handle? You weren't absent as a husband, Kody, you were absent as a father. And you can't sweet-talk your way out of this reality here. Kody leapt up once more. That's not true. I did the best I could for all of you. I was too thinly stretched. You knew the difficulties of plural marriage. The judge banged the gavel down more forcefully this time. Mr. Brown, be seated or I will have you removed from this courtroom. Kody's face reddened with anger, but he sat back down in his chair, seething in silence. The crowd leaned in, engrossed. This wasn't testimony any longer. This was confrontation, naked and unadorned. Janelle stared at him straight on, her tone gentler but slicing deeper. You said I was too independent. But do you have any idea why I needed to be independent, Kody? Because you weren't there. Because I didn't have a choice. While you were busy playing hero in another home, I was paying bills, raising children, and keeping everything else together. Independence wasn't something threatening. It was survival. Her words cut like knives. Kody's smirk faltered, his fists bunching under the table. She caught her breath, her eyes never leaving his. You craved control. You craved submission. But you forgot something. I might have been quiet, but I was never weak. And today, I won't be silent 1 second longer. The room fell silent. Some whispered. Others gasped. Even the journalists wrote faster, catching history unfolding. The judge demanded silence, but her face revealed the truth. She was hearing, intensely. Janelle went on, her voice firm now, like a woman who had discovered her flame. You attempted to belittle me. You attempted to delete me. But the reality is, I was the strength of this family. I worked when nobody else would. I gave up when nobody else did. And you took it all for granted. Her tone became more cutting. You used to tell me if I walked out on you, I'd regret it. That nobody would be there for me. But take a look, Kody. She pointed out at the gallery, where Christine and Mary sat with reddened faces. I'm not standing alone. No more. The crowd erupted into groans once more, some openly weeping, others vigorously nodding their heads in agreement. The bailiff held up his hand to maintain silence, but it was too late. The balance of power was shifting before everyone's eyes. For the first time, Kody's empire of domination and intimidation had cracked wide open before the world. Janelle brushed away her tears, her voice gentle but firm. You think you've won, because you've still got one wife standing alongside you. But the reality is, you've lost. You lost me. You lost Christine. You lost Mary. And worst of all, you lost the respect of the children who needed you most. Her last statement fell like a sledgehammer. Kody leaned forward, his red face expressionless with anger, but no speech was forthcoming. His silence was more eloquent than any plea for defense. The judge rapped her gavel gently, her eyes on him. Mr. Brown, you will get your turn later. Currently, this court has heard enough. We will recess. The gavel rang, but even as the judge left, and the courtroom hummed with whispers, the reality could not be denied. The fiery standoff had exposed all Kody's arrogance, Janelle's fortitude, and the inescapable change in dynamics. Janelle had finally stood up to Kody for the first time in decades, and the world had witnessed it unfold, live, unedited, and in real time. When the court came back in session after recess, the mood had changed. The vibes had altered. It wasn't a trial any longer. It was a reckoning. The judge nodded slightly to signal Janelle to proceed. Her eyes red but shoulders squared. Janelle folded her hands in front of her, taking a deep breath. Your Honor, I've explained my pain, but this case isn't only about me. It's about the children. Children who spent their whole lives thinking they weren't worthy of their father's love. The gallery rustled. Parents in the audience looked at each other with quiet compassion, others shaking their heads, others wiping away tears. Janelle's lawyer stood. Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to call Savannah Brown to the stand. The room gasped. Savannah, Janelle's youngest daughter with Kody, walked slowly toward the witness chair. Her hands trembled as she was sworn in. She was barely an adult, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had lived a lifetime of hurt. She sat down, holding on to the arms of the chair as though it would engulf her. Janelle nodded at her kindly, with tears ready to flow again. The attorney spoke softly. Savannah, can you describe to the court what kind of relationship you've had with your father? The courtroom went completely silent. Even Kody, who had come to the trial wearing arrogance as armor, sat forward, ill at ease. Savannah spoke in a near whisper. I just wanted my dad to love me like he loved Robin's children. The words cut through the courtroom like a knife. The gallery released a collective gasp. Christine wept openly now, burying her face in her hands. Mary placed a gentle hand on her arm for support. Savannah's eyes welled up. I'd call him and he'd not pick up. I'd wait for him to visit, but he never would. Holidays, birthdays, he was always too busy. But then I'd see photos of him grinning with Robin's kids, taking them on vacation, being there for them, and I couldn't figure out. Her voice broke. Why me? What was wrong with me? The courtroom trembled with emotion. Even the judge's normally stone-like face softened. Kody's attorney jumped up quickly. Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant, and it's being used to emotionally manipulate the court. Before the judge could answer, Savannah whipped her tear-stained face around toward her father. Her voice rose, shaking with fury. Is it manipulation, Dad? Or is it just the truth you don't want to hear? The whole room gasped. Kody went stiff. His mouth opened but nothing emerged. For once, the man who had always had an answer had nothing to say. Savannah went on, her hands trembling. All I ever wanted was for you to notice me, to hug me, to tell me I mattered. But you didn't. You made me feel invisible in my own family. She collapsed then, crying hysterically. Janelle moved forward, the judge permitting her to hug her daughter tightly. The sight of mother and child holding on to each other in the courtroom center was heartbreaking and indelible. The judge's tone was low, nearing gentle. The witness is excused. Thank you, Savannah. As Savannah made her way back to her chair, her tears refused to cease. Janelle stroked her daughter's hair aside, speaking in a hushed tone. You were never the issue. You were always enough. The gallery sniffled, with some wiping away tears. Even tough guy reporters looked shaken, their pens frozen mid-sentence. The attorney called another witness. Garrison, Janelle's son. He stood upright, but his jaw was clenched, his pain barely controlled. He stood his ground facing his father. You once taught me that loyalty was everything. But where was your loyalty to us, Dad? Where was it when Mom worked 2 jobs just to get by? Where was it when Savannah cried herself to sleep because you didn't come home? You were not loyal to us. You were loyal to your pride, your ego, and your favorite wife. The courtroom whispered in shock. Kody shifted restlessly, his fists clenched around the table's edge. Garrison's tone hardened. You always said family was everything. But you lied. You picked one family to love above the others. And now here you are acting like we did something wrong, and you didn't. We didn't do anything wrong, Dad, you did. The words hung between them like a last judgment. Kody's attorney attempted to object once more, but the judge glared at him into silence. The court will permit it. Janelle's tears streamed freely now. She had testified in her own voice, but hearing it reflected back from the voices of her children almost overwhelmed her. She turned to Kody, her words cracking as she spoke to him personally. Do you hear them, Kody? Do you finally hear what your decisions did to your children? This isn't my heartache, it's theirs, and they bear it every day. Kody flushed, but his pride broke. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his eyes scanning nervously around the room. He was small for the first time. The judge leaned over, her voice stern but understanding. Mr. Brown, it is apparent that this is not simply a matter of law. This is a family shattered by neglect and bias. These children's voices will not be silenced. The gallery murmured its applause softly, until order was interrupted again. Janelle dabbed away at her tears, her voice firm now. This is not an administrative office. This is a court of truth. And the truth is, Kody, you damaged this family in ways that no verdict can remove. But at least now the world sees. At least now my children's voices have been heard. The room was silent after. The judge made a notation, her eyes stern, her composure unbreakable. And as the session drew to a close, one thing was certain, the emotional breaking point had been met. Kody Brown's empire wasn't crumbling. It was being torn down piece by piece, voice by voice, tear by tear. And the world was watching it all second by second. The air in the courtroom was heavy, nearly stifling. Following the children's testimony about Janelle, the silence weighed so heavily that no one dared to disrupt it. It was the kind of silence that results after the naked truth has been exposed and no escaping path remains. The judge fumbled her papers, but her eyes rested on Janelle, then on Kody, slumped for the first time in his chair. His smug attitude had fissured, replaced by something new, uncertainty. The gavel came down once. We will now consider closing arguments. Janelle's lawyer stood, fastening his jacket with quiet assurance. He headed to the middle of the courtroom, his voice firm yet empathetic. Your Honor, this isn't a case about legal separation. This isn't a case about splitting up assets or signing documents. This is about dignity. This is about children who felt invisible in their own house. This is about a woman who devoted decades of her life to a man who vowed equality and provided favoritism, who vowed family and left devastation. He pointed at Janelle, who sat with her hands clenched in her lap, her eyes still shiny from Savannah's testimony. Janelle Brown has not come here for revenge. She has come here for truth. She has come here to see that her voice, and the voices of her children, are finally heard after so many years of silence. The lawyer paused, allowing the power of the words to resonate. We urge the court not only to grant her the divorce she is entitled to, but to acknowledge the emotional abuse, the neglect, and the harm Mr. Brown has inflicted. Because if this courtroom stands for anything, it must be that truth is important. That broken promises are not just words, and that no child, no woman should ever be made to feel less than. The gallery whispered in accord, some clapping quietly before the bailiff quieted them. Kody's attorney rose hastily, bordering on desperation. His voice was harsh, guarded. Your Honor, let us not be carried away by sentiment. Mr. Brown has tried his best to support a very large family under very unusual circumstances. He is being demonized because he could not split himself in half between so many children. He is no monster. He is a human being who made the effort, and simply could not live up to impossible standards. To punish him for that would be unjust, unfair, and unreasonable. He looked at Kody. Mr. Brown has just as much right to go on with his life as Mrs. Brown does. Let us not use the courtroom as a theater for grievances, but as a place for honest, reasonable judgment. Kody nodded, trying to straighten his shoulders once more, as if attempting to regain the confidence that had slipped away from him. But the words sounded vacuous against the raw emotion that had filled the courtroom just moments before. The judge settled back, her face inscrutable. Thank you, counsel. The court will adjourn briefly before rendering the verdict. When the judge reappeared, tension was palpable. With every groan of the wooden benches, every cough, every rustle of paper, the air seemed to reverberate. Cameras outside hummed, holding their breath for the news that would soon erupt in headlines. The judge cleared her throat. I have listened intently. I have considered the evidence. But above all, I have heard the words of those most hurt, Mrs. Brown and her children. This court cannot turn a blind eye to what has been said in this room. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw clenching. The judge went on.
Marriage, especially one founded on the pillars of faith and equality, should be about lifting each other up, not tearing each other down. But what I've seen here is a history of neglect, favoritism, and a lack of respect for equality of partnership. That's not a marriage. That's a violation of its very essence. Janelle's breath caught. Her fingers shook against the table. So therefore, the judge declared resolutely, this court issues a complete and immediate divorce between Mrs. Janelle Brown and Mr. Kody Brown. The gallery gasped. Janelle buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with relief.
But the judge wasn't done. In addition, based upon the testimony of the emotional damage the children suffered, this court recognizes their neglect. Though we cannot erase the past, we can have in place safeguards for the future. Brown, if you want to have any relationship with your children, it will be through counseling, accountability, and evidence of consistency. This court will not permit any further emotional abandonment. The words fell like thunder. Kody's face went white. The judge's eyes were cold, unyielding. This is not punishment, Mr. Brown. This is consequence. You may rebuild your relationships only if you work for them. The gallery erupted into muted applause before the bailiff snapped for order again. Janelle cried openly. But these were not the tears she had wept previously. These were tears of freedom, of release. She stood turning toward her children, who rushed to embrace her. Savannah clung to her mother, whispering through sobs, "We did it, Mom. We're free." Christine, unable to contain herself, cried out from the gallery, "Yes, Janelle. You're finally free." Her voice carried the joy of someone who had walked that same painful road. Mary, usually reserved, wiped her own tears and whispered, "It's about time." Kody, however, sat stock still, his eyes flitting between the judge, the audience, and the cameras snapping through the glass. For the first time, the empire he had constructed on charm, control, and ego had completely collapsed. Newspaper reporters scribbled frantically, some already dictating their headlines into recorders. Janelle Brown wins emotional court battle. Judge condemns Kody Brown's neglect. Children's voices break silence. Janelle moved forward, her voice shaking but firm. She gazed straight at the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor. Not only for me, but for my children, for restoring their worth to them." The judge nodded gravely. This court is adjourned. The gavel descended, and with it decades of silence were broken. Outside the courthouse steps were swarmed by reporters, and blinding flashes of cameras. Janelle stepped out, surrounded by her children. She cradled Savannah's hand in one and Garrison's in the other, her face aglow not with the tumult of reporters, but with the brightness of hard-won freedom. A reporter yelled, "Janelle, what do you want to say to the world today?" She hesitated, then said loudly, her voice ringing over microphones, "I want to say this. No woman should ever remain silent when she's being belittled. No child should ever feel inferior. We may have a broken family, but today we discovered our power. Today we opted for truth." The crowd erupted in cheers, her words going viral on every screen, every headline. As she strolled away with her children, the burden of years seemed to roll off her shoulders. She was no longer the meek, patient wife, hiding in the shadow of a polygamy empire. She was Janelle Brown, the woman who stood in a courtroom, spoke her truth, and reclaimed her dignity. And as the cameras trailed behind her, one thing became certain. This was not the end of her tale. This was just the start. Because sometimes the greatest triumphs aren't achieved with armies or gold. They're achieved with courage, with truth, and with the unyielding voice of a woman refusing to be quieted.